So great, welcome everyone. We're really glad that you're here for today's panel discussion on careers in research in the humanities and social sciences. And today's panel discussion is part of the year-long Careers Beyond Academia series, which is co-sponsored with the Office of Postdoctoral Services and the Duke Career Center. My name is Melissa Bostrom. I'm the Assistant Dean for Graduate Student Professional Development in the Graduate School, and I'm really pleased to welcome all of you and all of our panelists here today. Today's going to be a fairly informal discussion towards the end, but towards the beginning, I do have some questions that folks who registered for today shared with us, and so I want to start with those questions, and I also share those with our panelists ahead of time. So just to let you know, that's how the structure is going to work today, and then as we go on, we'll move to some more questions from folks in the audience. So without further ado, let me introduce our panelists. Starting from your far left, Benjamin Dalton, who is a senior education researcher at RTI International. He holds a bachelor's degree in sociology from Roanoke College and a PhD in sociology from Duke University. Welcome back. To his right is Joyce Kurpiers. She is a qualitative researcher at Kurpiers Consulting. She holds a bachelor's degree in biology at the College of St. Benedict, a master's in musicology and music history from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and a PhD in musicology from Duke University. Welcome back. Then we have, to Joyce's left, we have Robert Beach, who is senior economist at RTI International. He holds a bachelor's degree in biomedical engineering from here at Duke, and then went astray for his PhD in economics from North Carolina State University.
We forgive you.
And rounding out our panel is Alison Parker, who is research scientist at IoT Innovation Research and Training. And she holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Windsor in Ontario, Canada, a master's degree in developmental psychology from Brock University in St. Catharines, Ontario, and her PhD in developmental psychology from North Carolina State University. Welcome. So we're going to start the panel discussion. I'm going to ask Ben to begin the conversation today for our first question. And that is just, can you describe your current job for us? And what are the major responsibilities that are in your job description?
Sure. So I'm, as Melissa said, I'm an education researcher. So I work in a group that at this point has about 200 other staff members that focuses mostly on education surveys and education, large-scale education studies. And I'm a kind of a bit of a jack of all trades. When I started out, I can talk a little bit about this later, but I started out more as an analyst, as somebody who was using their quantitative skills to do reports and analyses of the data we were collecting and reports for the federal government, who is our primary client. We do data collections for the National Center for Education Statistics, which is our sort of big bread and butter. And so I still do analyze data and do write reports as one of my major job responsibilities. Then I also, as I've been there longer, I kind of moved on to a lot of other things. I guess I'd say there's just management of projects. So I'm project director, for example, for U.S. News and World Report puts out a best high schools list every year, and RTI does that work for them, collects the data and does the analysis for them. And so I lead that project, lead the team doing that, programmers and data collection people. And I also work as like an associate project director on some other studies, some larger studies, contracts with the federal government. And so I do all sorts of things, review reports, extremely exciting work. Review reports, make sure things are on schedule, deal with any problems that come up from anywhere between just the planning stage of how are we going to get these data from all of these people or institutions to a final report, and why does this figure look weird, and can you make that work right? And I'd say the other major thing I do is I do some management of staff and career development of staff a little bit, and I also do a lot of proposals though. We do a lot of proposals and a lot of big proposals at RTI. And these are not, at least in my group, we don't do a whole lot of grants. We do a lot of contracts. So the federal government puts out a request for proposals and says we need a contractor to do this, collect this data for these studies. So we respond to those proposals, put together large volumes, stuff as much text as we can, and nice figures saying that we're the best to do the job, get a large volume, business volume with the budget and everything like that. So I've led proposals and been responsible for big parts of proposals. So that's another big aspect of my day-to-day work, and knee-deep in one of those right now, which they can vary from being very fun to being a nightmare, and everything in between. But it's hard to do.
Thank you.
First, thank you for inviting me to participate in this. This is such a great idea. And can I just give you all credit for being here and having the foresight to take time out of we all know how busy you are right now. And so I hope you give yourselves credit for taking time out to do really smart, upfront work like this. So, I conduct, I'm a market research consultant. What that means is I'm a freelancer, I'm in business for myself, and I moderate focus groups. I conduct one-on-one interviews, we call them in-depth interviews. I conduct ethnographies on behalf of corporate and academic clients so that I can make strategic recommendations for them in terms of whatever their business problem might be. On the corporate side, that might have to do with, say, product design or marketing communications plans, 5-year strategy plans. A lot of the questions on the academic side are quite similar. We were just talking about some of this earlier. Some of the questions might have to do with alumni engagement, particularly for advancement or fundraising, application erosion. How do we continue to attract students to our program so that we can justify budgets, request funding, that sort of thing. Let's see, so what is my job about? I mentioned that I run focus groups and conduct interviews. Really my job is about listening to people and learning from people. In the kind of industry parlance, I would say I collect qualitative data on behalf of my client so that I can make these strategic recommendations. What that allows me to do is be involved in a project. Because I'm a sole proprietor, I am responsible for everything from project inception to completion. The roles and responsibilities that I carry out are actually twofold. I have roles and responsibilities to my client, but I also have responsibilities to myself in sustaining an income that supports my household with my husband and my dog. My dog doesn't actually contribute all that much. I really wish she would listen to free water, but I'll work on that. She's still in training. So responsibilities to myself, I am responsible for finance and administration. I make sure taxes get paid and bills get paid, etc. I'm responsible for what you might call business development and marketing. My business relies on relationships. It's very high touch and relationship driven. And we might talk about the importance of networking or how to go about networking later as we talk. And then obviously, or maybe not obviously, operations. I am 100% of the operations team. I guess that's the segue to my responsibilities to my client. My first role in working with a client is as strategic advisor. Even before, I mentioned earlier that the ultimate goal is to make recommendations based on data that help my client further themselves toward a vision for their academic department, for their product, for their whatever the business problem is. But strategic advising for me begins even before a project begins, as I listen very intently to a client's pain points, their needs, their expectations, how they're perceiving their industry, and then working with them to develop a series of objectives that help me design a project and recommend to them, here's how I think we can go about solving your problem in terms of this kind of cost effectiveness, resource allocation, timeline, etc. So I'm a strategic advisor, and then I'm a writer. If I'm conducting a project solo, I am 100% responsible for proposal writing. If I'm working with a team, and we might talk about this more later, I network with a number of other freelancers around the country. I was saying earlier, I think the statistic is something like 70% of market researchers are freelance. And I have had the fortune and I've done the work to connect with a lot of these other researchers around the country. So we will pass work back and forth. We'll collectivize as teams to work on some of these projects. So I will co-manage proposal development. So I'm a strategic advisor, I'm a writer, and I'm a team manager. Once the proposal is completed and won, I'm involved in, I've already completed the project design, so I'm involved in project implementation, so I'm a project manager. And I think that's probably something that every one of us can relate to, is project management. So I'm involved in everything from the 35,000 foot level to the granular level, and everything in between. Ultimately, once we have the data, once we've analyzed the data, I write a report that communicates to my client the nuggets from the data that I believe directly speak to the problems that they outlined as we were developing the proposal. So I would say I'm a project manager and strategic thinker who collects qualitative data so that I can make strategic recommendations that help my clients solve business problems.
So I'm a senior economist working in agricultural and resource economics areas, and primarily around climate change and bioenergy and environmental sustainability. I'm also at RTI, so there are certainly some of the things that Benjamin described are similar in a different topic area. I mean, I'm also leading a number of projects and working with different project teams around some work looking at the net impacts of bioenergy using different feedstocks on land use change and emissions and food prices, climate change impacts and adaptation. Again, a lot of it around agriculture and forestry, and what does that potentially mean for those markets and for net emissions and land use, and then around mitigation as well. So leading a number of projects, I used to manage a group of economists working on these topics. As of the last 2 years, I changed responsibilities a bit to have a fellow position at RTI. So now it means that part of my time is covered not by projects, but out of internal funds to focus more on working on papers and building collaboration and and presentations, those kinds of research activities. Also a lot of big responsibilities, just identifying opportunities for new projects, new collaborations. I'm also leading up an internally funded effort that we have around trying to do more internationally in food and agriculture and food security. And in particular, bringing a lot of analytical modeling to look at economics and the effects of alternative policies. So we've been actively reaching out to a number of potential collaborators in Europe and in Latin America and Asia and elsewhere to try to really build our own network of collaborators. So another part of the job is as it would be in an academic position, but going to professional conferences and talking about your work and networking and really trying to build collaborations that can lead to hopefully interesting future research projects. As for Benjamin, I mean, certainly writing proposals is an important part of it. You have to bring in work to fund your own time and your group's time, others that you work with. So there's a lot of work to again put, as Benjamin said, right, put your best foot forward in terms of why you should be doing a certain sort of work. I mean, certainly in what I'm doing, we work with universities a lot. We work some with Duke, especially with the Nichols School of the Environment, but also, I'm currently working with MIT, Ohio State, University of Idaho, Texas A&M, forget some others now, I think, but a number of universities. I mean, a lot of what we're doing in our group is fairly similar to what you might be doing at a university, but a lot of it is done under contracts, so it is a little different. There's a little less flexibility sometimes than the grant world. There's some grants as well. I'm working on an NSF grant too, but a lot of it is more. You do have more deadlines and like day to day. A lot of the work that we do is for EPA, but then there's a lot of day-to-day calls and progress and deadlines, ideally, at least, a lot of the work potentially feeds into policy decisions, and what EPA for a lot of what we're doing, EPA, USDA, sometimes DOE in particular, are thinking about alternative policies and decisions, and working with the White House, etc. So there are. That's probably one difference in some academic positions. There tend to be a lot, more deadlines, shorter turnaround, a lot of things going on at once across multiple different projects. But overall, it's sort of divided between project management and then trying to develop new projects, and a lot of that through building collaborations and working with other organizations, and then professional development activities again. Publications, presentations, being present at key conferences and networking, and hopefully building the influence of the work that we're doing.
I'm Alison, and I am a research scientist at Innovation Research and Training, which is in Durham, and we are a small behavioral sciences research company. And our goals are to develop and evaluate school-based programs or education programs, online trainings for community, different types of organizations, and also we do creative assessment tools as well for clinicians and researchers. And so the goal of all of that is, though, to improve the well-being of children and adolescents. And so I was in graduate school working on looking at children's emotional and social development, and most of the research we did was in that area. But I wanted to take that and be able to apply it. So our main role is that we take existing research and we translate that into programs for children. So we use a lot of our research in the area of child development, adolescent development, and take that and create programs to develop different intervention prevention programs. So for example, substance use prevention, sexual health and relationships, coping strategies. So we do a lot in the prevention area. Similarly with RTI, we write a lot of grants, and so we have grants from the National Institute of Health and the Department of Education, but we also get contracts also from the federal government, but also from different organizations. So for example, Big Brother, Big Sister, we have worked with them to create online mentoring training and other organizations. And so we do similar, lots of networking as well, so that we can, part of my job also, in addition to writing grants and contracts, is also going to conferences to present our work and publishing as well. So once that we have developed our program, we evaluate it, and then we write up those findings to show that our programs are all evidence-based. And so a lot of my job right now, we have funding to develop, I do a lot of work in the area of mindfulness, so mindfulness-based stress reduction, and so a lot of my job right now is developing a program for elementary school kids to teach them mindfulness, to help them to facilitate the development of self-regulatory abilities, so being able to better manage their emotions and their behaviors so they can have healthy decision making. And so we're working on that right now, and when that program is finished, we'll be doing a large study to evaluate its effectiveness. And so at IRT, we're really lucky because we have a lot of different departments, and so the researchers, we will develop our materials and we'll share it with our art department, an amazing set of graphic designers, and also our IT department, which has our programmers, and they can take everything that we give them and they make it function wonderful and beautiful. So we're very lucky to be able to have that team with us. And we also have our own research teams too, so research assistants who help us and work with us as well. And so most of our responsibilities, like I said, are developing these programs, and so a lot of that includes doing some focus groups to hear from children and teachers to get their feedback on our development, and then also doing smaller studies, all with the goal of really an iterative development of our programs to make sure that we're getting feedback from everyone as we create our programs. And then once we are finished with that and we write up the results, then we can write grants to continue in that area. There's a possibility to do larger studies, or we've also been working on developing mindfulness programs for middle school and high school. So learning what we have with the younger and applying it to the, and making it developmentally appropriate for the older age groups. And we also do a lot of working with our IT department so we can make things very technologically innovative. And then trying to move the way schools are moving. And so we're also trying to go to conferences and to learn from them to see what teachers and schools are doing now to help inform us in our work. So a lot of it is similar of writing grants, leading projects, but also doing a lot of development in terms of being, we call like an external ambassador for our company, being able to network and to find new opportunities for us to, because we're similar that for us to keep going, we also need to write grants and contracts, so we're similar in that way.
Fantastic, thank you all. So I'm going to break up our next question into a couple parts, I think, because y'all were so ambitious, we actually covered questions 1 and 2, I think, in those initial answers, so I'm going to break apart the next one a little bit. And that is, let's talk a little bit about transferable skills. And let's talk a bit about what are the skills that you feel like are the most important in what you do now, and how would you relate those to things that you did while you were in graduate school to build those skills, or are there skills that you can draw on, that are important to your role now? Maybe 1 or 2 skills that you use kind of often in your current role. And I'm going to start with Joyce this time.
Sure. First, great question. And here's why I think so. I was reading some research from the USGA Government Accountability Office and from some private research firms that are predicting that by the year 2020, over 40% of the US workforce will be what they call contingency workers, contract or part-time. And some studies are pushing that to suggest that that will be nearing 50% in the 2020s. So the way that we think about pursuing work, I think, will shift. It's already starting to shift. And I think as I think about advising graduate students or anyone who's looking at their career 20, 30, 40 years down the road, this is the kind of thinking that I think will be most helpful to them. Assessing your strengths, assessing your skill set, and recognizing the array of options you might have in finding fulfilling work in any of those arenas. I would say, since this is ubiquitous, at least among this panel, project management skills are key. You're already using them, and you have many, many opportunities here on campus to continue developing them. So, as I think about how I wrote my dissertation, I had to come up with what I would call a strategic plan. What chapters am I going to write? When am I going to write them? What content exactly will I address in each chapter? What's my goal for a final project? Then let's not take the nitty-gritty of making those plans for granted, because that is a valuable skill. Not everyone has them. Would you all agree? That is definitely a skill and very much valued. If you feel then a drive to continue building, advancing your skills in that way, and this is a hard one because we all know how busy you are. Get involved in something that resonates with your values or your interests. Maybe something that's co-curricular or extracurricular, where you can get involved in a project that maybe involves a budget, where maybe you have to be involved in a fundraising plan, where you have to see something from completion to fruition, where you have to plan tasks, and then create a narrative that you can use in interviews if you're looking for a traditional position. Create a story that you can use to talk about how you achieved your ultimate goal. So project management skills, you're definitely using them in grad school, and they're definitely transferable. I have a lot more to say, but there are other smart people on the panel, so maybe I'll just interject if you all don't mind.
Okay, well, I agree with Joyce. I mean, I think that's really important in terms of being able to plan and put things together, and certainly not everyone can do it. Another transferable skill, I think, is being able to look at a wide array of information and really be able to distill it and focus and get some story out of it. A lot of people, you'll find, really struggle with that, actually, and there's sort of, they have a really hard time just pulling information together and telling a coherent story and really understanding the big picture more. And I think as you work on that, and in graduate school, writing papers for classes or thinking about a thesis or dissertation, I think being able to fairly rapidly be able to synthesize information and understand key points and big story and communicate it to others if you're trying to collaborate with them, if you're trying to eventually convince somebody they should provide you with some funding to pursue the work further. I think that's a really important skill, and some people really do struggle with that for a long time. Like, they get so distracted by many different details, sort of taking different directions, and have a really hard time putting together a focused story that makes the case for why you should be doing this work, right? and why you should be the one to do it. So I think that's something to think about.
And I would build on that in terms of being able to get your point across. My skill would be writing. And so writing. And so we do a lot of writing, and I think that I was fortunate in graduate school that we also did a lot of writing. We were able to contribute in some ways to grants, and so I was able to become familiar with it and know what type of writing you had to do was specific for that, which is a bit different than writing for publications or just writing papers for class. But so just having lots of opportunities, even if it's just writing a little a day, and even writing different types of curricula, that's a different type of writing. But just the experience of writing, being able to get your ideas out and get them out in a very concise and succinct way, and also being able to get feedback from others and be able to get feedback on your writing, because then you continue to grow as a writer by getting from your professors or other peers, of just continuing to learn and how to shape your writing. I think is just a really good skill to take and to bring to your next position.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because you might think we would mention like technical skills that you're developing, things you're studying, but we're talking about much broader things that aren't necessarily not the focus of graduate programs. You're learning all sorts of things about your field, about the issues in your field, and about how to investigate them. That's, technical skills stuff. Most people are smart enough, they can pick that up along the way. Some of these, we're really talking about a lot of softer skills. And that's kind of, I would even go broader than, and say a skill like how to figure out how to motivate yourself to get things done, how to be persistent, how to, certainly speaking to project management, how to be organized. And those are skills. I mean, it takes skill to like figure out how am I going to find the energy to do this thing at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And there are a lot of tricks to do that. Some organizational, some interpersonal. Certainly collaborating with people is a big help and a big change from, I think, what many, but not necessarily every graduate student experiences, which is, I work in teams pretty much on everything. There's almost nothing that I work on, except occasionally a paper that I do by myself that I'm not collaborating with someone on. And so by, getting on the calendar and meeting regularly and getting feedback, and you're forcing yourself to kind of work on things that maybe you don't want to work on. So I agree with everything said here. These are all difficult skills to kind of pick up in graduate school, both because you have so little time and it's just not something that's embedded in the curriculum. But you can go out and you can find like project management courses. I mean, there's a project management certification you can get, and if you're not involved in a complex project, it's kind of hard to figure out how to apply it, but picking up the concepts and thinking about that, I think is really, really very valuable. And all sorts of things with the budgeting and scheduling and managing teams and things like that. Those are not, those are things that are, I guess, probably more based in your career experiences, work experiences, where you really pick it up. Harder to pick up in grad school, but there are formal ways to get exposed to that.
So I also want to ask, and I won't put you in any order for this, if you could get in a time machine and go back to your graduate school time, is there maybe one thing that you would have done differently to develop a transferable skill that you feel like you really use all the time now? Or is there something that you wish you would have done to prepare for what you're doing now?
I mean, I would say some of the things I was just talking about, trying to figure out, really how to, you talked about doing your dissertation, developing the plan, and I wasn't as organized as that.
By necessity, I was.
Yeah, there was always a struggle to get motivated and to really make continual progress. And so any ways that you can figure out how to make that happen. Like I said, you can find formal courses out there. Even just reading about organization, how to organize yourself. It seems like really simple, but sometimes when you're successful as a student and you get into grad school and you're going along and everything's going pretty well, you don't pay attention to those things because people figure you have those things figured out. But even just perusing articles online about what are some good organizational tips to keep my work from being overwhelming to me. Those are the kinds of skills I think that are definitely something I use every day and be good to develop as early as possible.
Would it be okay if I kind of polled the room and got a sense for how we can be most helpful to you? How many of you would consider yourselves humanities people, literature, art, history, that sort of thing? And how many of you are social science people that do use quantitative data? Okay, so you're probably, so to some degree you're using SPSS or SAS. Okay, this would not have been a skill that a musicologist would have developed during graduate school, but since you have that opportunity now, recognize the value in that, and I'll let you all speak to that. Data analytics, there's so many opportunities for you, and if you are financially motivated, there can be some extremely lucrative opportunities for you. So if you know SPSS but you don't yet know SAS, take it. There's SAS University Edition that is probably available here at Duke take advantage of the opportunity to learn that, expand your skill set, and at least be able to claim that you have familiarity with the platform. As someone who does qual research and is tangentially engaged with quantitative data, that is often a skill set. I mean, I've recently taken a number of statistics classes and I've played around with SAS myself, but I won't have the level of experience that you can deliver.
And I agree that it's it's important to have the technical skills and how to expand them, but I mean somewhat I think a little more Benjamin said too. I think it was interesting to me how important the more soft skills are. Like when we're thinking about who we're going to hire, for instance, I mean, you can find, you tend to have a lot of people that seem to have very good technical skills, but in terms of who actually works out well, it's a lot of the soft skills. You get people that are really, really technically skilled, but they're not that organized, or you find a lot of people are not good writers. It's surprising how many people come out and they can't write, or just don't want to write. It's a lot of that, just communication, organization, writing, I mean, things that sometimes aren't as emphasized, I think, at least in more technical programs where you're working under just very highly technical understanding, which is certainly necessary and useful. But there's a lot outside of that that ends up being pretty important in terms of success in the workplace.
I concur. I think both the technical, but also the skills to prepare you for leading like the larger projects. So sometimes when you're a graduate student, you do get to lead some, like the undergraduates, but it's a bit different when you're the principal investigator and in charge of a large number of people and the budgets and things like that. So that is a new thing. But the good thing is that we've learned is that of being able to watch your professors that you work with, your advisors, and it's helpful to be able to learn from them or ask questions for them. I wish I had asked more questions before leaving.
Thank you. So I'm going to start with Robert for this next question. That is, can you talk a little bit about your career path to your current position?
Sure, yes. So mine, so I grew up on a dairy farm in Pennsylvania, and then came down to Duke and majored in biomedical engineering, partly because I was thinking, I was really interested in marine biology, but thinking it wasn't that practical, and thinking, well, I don't really want to stay in school and get a PhD, and unless I do that, it's probably hard to get a very good job with a marine biology degree. And so thinking biomedical engineering was more practical, and I enjoyed it, but I added economics as a minor on the way, and then ended up deciding that that really I thought longer term I was more interested in thinking about economics and policy. I also thought at the time I didn't really want to do anything related to agriculture. I was thinking of more industrial organization and other topics. But but then as I so I ended up going to NC State into the economics program, and just as I talked to professors and worked through coursework and went through, I was thinking about what I really want to do. And actually there were a lot of really interesting topics around environment and sustainability and climate and how do we produce enough food and do it in a sustainable way. And so of course I ended up not working on a farm, but working back in agriculture, which I didn't really think would happen. And so I actually started at RTI 4 months before I defended my dissertation, and then wrapped up over the first few months that I was there, and I've been there since. So I don't have like a real long history of different places. I mean, I've thought about other opportunities at times, but it ended up overall I've been pretty happy being in the Triangle and being at RTI. So I've been there for it'll be 17 years in December. But the focus has changed a bit. I mean, flexibility is also important. So initially I was working more around air quality policy, and then it's moved more into climate change and bioenergy and food security, and moving beyond the U.S. to a lot of international food security and greenhouse gas mitigation and related topics. So over time I started out managing smaller projects and bigger projects and contracts, and then starting to lead a group of other researchers. And like I said, over the last 2 years I've moved to a position where at least I have some additional time and flexibility to pursue some of my own research interests outside of just the projects that we have. But certainly, also leading a number of projects and working with some more junior researchers. So, really over time, just gaining more seniority and responsibility, but still at RTI. And again, evolving a bit. There's been some flexibility in terms of what the main focus has been, but it's always been around economics and policy and ties to environmental outcomes, and how do you design policies that are more cost-effective and efficient in terms of the environmental outcomes.
I went into psychology, and in the 11th grade in high school they taught a psychology class, and that's when I was hooked. And then I went to the guidance counselor and said, what do I do for psychology? He said, you got to get your PhD. I was like, okay. So I knew since the 11th grade that that's what I was going to do. So I went to the University of Windsor and did psychology, and was very fortunate to be able to do a thesis there and to get experience doing some research in the area of families and parenting. And then I wanted to continue that and do a master's in developmental psychology, which is still focusing on the area of research and looking at families and parent-child relationships and continuing to build children's social and cognitive development. And then I was actually, my honors thesis was, I used a measure from a professor at NC State in the psychology department, and I presented that at a conference. And she came to my presentation and said, what are you doing after your master's? And I said, I'm applying to graduate school. And she said, you should apply to me at NC State. And I was like, okay. So my parents were not happy because I was moving from Canada to the United States of America. So I applied to different schools, but I really wanted to come to NC State to work with this researcher because it fit really well with the area I was interested in. And so I was able to come and then continue to work and get my PhD in developmental psychology there, and continue to work in just the area of really improving the lives of children and families. And then as I was finishing near the end of NC State, I was helping by being an advisor in the psychology department for freshmen, also teaching some classes. And then I met a former graduate student who had a position at IRT, and she told me about it, and I applied for a position there for, at the time we were called Research Associates. And so I applied for a position there, and then I started IRT, and so I started as in charge of one particular project, and then as I continued to work there on the project, then there were opportunities for me to write my own grants and be the lead project director and principal investigator. And so I've kind of gone from the role of working as a project director for someone else's project, be able to work and create my own portfolio of projects at IRT. And so that's what I have been doing now. And I've been there for 10 years today. Thanks.
Well, I think I'll say that there really are a lot of different career paths. And I'll start from the point of graduate school, and I was a little undecided about whether to go into academia or not to go into academia. And I applied to academic jobs, did interviews, and had a couple of offers, but they were in location, they were further away from like my family, further away from my fiance at the time, and I didn't want to do that. And so I wound up taking a job in DC and with the American Institutes for Research, which is like another large independent nonprofit research company like RTI. And was there a couple of years, then wound up coming to RTI where I've been for 10 years. And so I think it can be really different depending on the kinds of organizations you get into. I think if you're at a smaller organization or if you're on your own, you have more opportunities to kind of get into leadership positions or project management opportunities. At least in my group in RTI, we do these really large studies. We do a lot of different things, and there are a lot of different opportunities. But the really big ones are, they come up for renewal maybe every 5 years. And there's been a project director who's done it for 20 years. And so that person's not going to shift out of that position. So at a larger organization, sometimes you can be a little slower in your career path, but there's still plenty of really good opportunities and benefits to that. So that's sort of been my progress at RTI, and from AIR to RTI has kind of been slowly taking on more and more responsibilities over time. And but there are a lot of different ways you can go with it. And one issue that I've discussed before with grad students is kind of how hard it is to the issue of kind of going back into academia. Say you went into a non-academic career path, can you get back into academia? Or vice versa, if you start out in an academic postgraduate career. And you can, I think it's easier early on in your career to do that. But kind of as you develop all these skills that are either specific to an organization or specific to certain kinds of work that you do, especially as you get further away from teaching or something like that, then it gets harder to move back into academia. But from my perspective, I'm very happy where I am. RTI is really good because it has very low turnover. A lot of people like it there. I've been working with many of the same people for as long as I've been there. Leave it there.
So, to make a circuitous story short and linear, I finished my PhD here at Duke in 2009, which was a crackerjack time to be looking for a traditional kind of job. And what was familiar to me was the corporate world. I had worked, I think Melissa mentioned that I was a biology major, biology and English, in fact, as an undergrad, and I worked in medical sales and marketing in my 20s. And found that it didn't resonate with who I am and the service mission-based person, inspired person that I am, which is what led me to pursue graduate school. So when I finished my degree in 2009, oh, and I'll mention too that when I was in grad school, I worked for 3 years in my undergrad institution in their career services department. So I had a lot of information about career exploration, job search, that kind of thing. So I felt like I had something of an edge compared to a lot of students. So when I finished in 2009, what was familiar to me was, I get the corporate world, I get how they think. It doesn't necessarily resonate with me. So what I knew to do was to fall back on those career exploration skills. I did a lot of networking. I took a lot of people to lunch. But it's extremely valuable, which you probably can all relate to. I mean, you learn what other people do. You have these one-on-one conversations about, well, what do you do from 8 to 5 every day? What does it really look like? I mean, your work day looks very different from my work day. You go to a brick and mortar place. I do a lot of my work. 80% of my meetings are remote, through conference call and Skype and Google Hangs. So very different. You learn how people are out there in the world and how they apply their skills and strengths to find meaningful work for themselves. I learned a lot about what did or didn't resonate with me, and I discovered a number of people who had been involved in, who had trained in cultural anthropology, who found a niche in market research. my dissertation methodology was ethnographic. So I have training in cultural anthropology, and I was able to marry all these skill sets, the corporate and the corporate sensibility, along with the data collection, and networked with a lot of people who do market research. It started small. I asked people to let me do, and I'll tell you, asked them to let me do the grunt work, some of the grunt work on your project. And so I took on these small projects, and it might have been, some of them were like transcribing other people's interviews. So literally headphones, sitting for an hour and just typing for hours, or that kind of thing. But I delivered, and then I tried to over-deliver on those where I could. So if I was transcribed for one of my partners up in Milwaukee, she asked me to transcribe, or allowed me to transcribe these interviews for some pay, which was very helpful. But I said, well, hey, if I think of insights that I think might be helpful to you, can I list those out for you? Can I present those to you? And she said, yeah, sure, it cost her nothing. And later, on another project for a different client, she came back to me and said, hey, I just need you to proofread this report. But if you come up with insights, I would love to have you articulate those, because the way that you articulate insights for my academic clients resonate with them. The way you speak makes sense to them. The way you write makes sense to them. And so I was able to build on things like that, which helped me build confidence, which I think is a challenge if we're all to be honest with ourselves. We all have those self-doubts or those insecurities, or how do I make this work and how do I figure this out? Do I really fit here? And once you are able to kind of step into those waters and realize, you know what, I swim better than I thought I might, you build a lot of confidence. And I was ultimately able to win projects of my own design, and ultimately have, like I said, a partner network and repeat academic and corporate clients. And that is how I got here.
Thank you. I want to take a break from the prepared list of questions at this point and kind of open things up to the floor. Does anybody in the audience have a question they'd like to share?
I guess, so you all mentioned kind of the importance of the soft skills. I was wondering how does one show that you have these soft skills, or how does one kind of communicate those?
I think that sometimes it can come out in the interview. So I guess it depends on the different types of interview questions that you're asked, but we ask a lot of questions that have a lot of scenarios, and then we ask that can kind of, those skills can come up to ask about that. And so a lot of times in the interview can come in that way. Sometimes too, we've seen in the letters that we get, like the cover letter comes with it, that will describe some of those as well. But mostly it's in the in-person, as bringing it up in that meeting or in some way to, when you're answering a question, bringing in that, as well, or strategies that you use to be organized or to be, take initiative and things like that, to show them the examples when asked.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question, because it's not always, it might not always be obvious, and you do ideally want to communicate that. And certainly a cover letter, we've started asking more for writing samples, but even then it's sort of hard to tell if the person really necessarily wrote it themselves, or if it's co-authored or something. I mean, typically we have anybody that that's applying for one of the positions that involves a graduate degree. Usually they come in and we have them give a presentation, like before lunchtime, and then have lunch, and in addition to interviewing the people. And so that's at least one important way to tell, well, how organized is this presentation? Are they able to communicate effectively? Although I think part of your question is, how do you convince people that in the first place that they invite you in to have an interview, right? And that is a little harder. I know it's harder for us to evaluate or tell sometimes before you actually have somebody in. But so you made a better suggestion. But it is probably I think it is important to try to convey that, say, as part of a cover letter, or part of your resume or CV, that you have yeah, I mean, I guess potentially if it is other coursework or something you've done, you can show it would demonstrate some of those kinds of skills. But part of it, and then certainly, yeah, when you come in an interview or give a presentation, and that's pretty, that's important. That often is a decider, because again, often there's multiple people that seem to be very technically qualified often, but so then a lot of who is getting job offers, a lot of it is around like communication skills and how they do when they come in and present their work.
Yeah, and I would agree that when you're in an interview, just showing that you're cognizant of, they're not just asking you for your technical knowledge or your training, they're asking for you to work with other people and to be organized and show and be responsive to clients and be nice and be prompt and all these things that if you just show an awareness of that in kind of interpersonal communication when you're talking to people, I think that comes through usually pretty strongly. And I also recommend, I think echo something Joyce said about find any opportunity you can to like lead little projects or show that you've had experience doing something that involves bringing people together, collaborating with it, making something work, other than something you're working on individually, because that's I think a pretty clear demonstration. Like, oh, okay, you get it, you understand some of the challenges involved in that.
And I think the only thing that I would add to all of these really cogent arguments is how do you get that interview through that cover letter or resume? Think about the language that you use in your resume bullet points. Negotiated, collaborated, built teams, around XYZ. So think about the language that's going to communicate exactly what you're getting at.
Let me back up to even a question I think before that, and that is, what are kind of the expectations for cover letters and resumes? And I don't mean to leave you out, Joyce, here, but when you're hiring for positions like yours at your organizations, are you looking for a resume? Are you looking for a CV? What kind of length of cover letter are you looking for? And for folks in the audience who are looking for these kinds of jobs, where are some places they might look? Where are some good listings? And I'll let anybody jump in who wants to here.
Well, I can say, I think it's, at least at RTI, it's pretty standard in terms of the application process. A cover letter usually would be 1 page, maybe 2 pages if you have a lot to say. It really go into showing that you've thought about the organization and you are somewhat aware of what it does, and that, like we kind of said, you are bringing more than just your technical skills. Certainly, whether it's a CV or a resume or however that's formatted doesn't matter too much. It's just as long as it's understandable and there aren't egregious errors in it. I think most places are comfortable. Unless there's a specific template they're telling you to fill out. In terms of where you can look, there's all sorts of places you can look. A lot of people we find, at least in my group, are people, we have some, well, I guess probably at the senior level it is a lot of networking. But even for people who are being hired sort of as a postdoc or early career, just being able to connect at conferences. I mean, they might set up a table or something like that, and you go to talk to somebody at you find some information about that company, or have attended a presentation and just talk with them. To have some sort of connection there sometimes helps. But then there are also regular postings in like your disciplines. Maybe you have an association that publishes an employment bulletin or something like that. RTI would often advertise in that kind of place. AIR would do similarly. So that's a start anyway to answer your question.
And ours is similar of just submitting a cover letter, but also in your resume, but also adding a writing sample too is what we ask to and if it just is to show some of it. So sometimes someone doesn't have a postdoc if they're or a publication if they're very new, but just even a writing from a strong paper from a class is helpful to give as well. And then we also the same publish from like APA or put our postings on there. We also, when we have a position, we always post it on our website, but we also send it out to the psychology departments and the universities in the area, send it to professors, and they'll share, hopefully share it among their departments. But that's a lot of what we do too, and the same at conferences too, is just meeting new students or just going to presentations of and seeing where people are from. It's very similar.
Yeah, I'd say very, very similar to both, obviously we're even at the same place, but although it's a bit different between groups in terms of what people ask for. But definitely trying to network, I think, is helpful. I mean, sometimes we specifically reach out to faculty members that we have hired their students before, or we know they're working on related topics. I mean, we post things like job openings for economists. Again, I mean, there's similar kinds of listings for other fields. But there, and of course on our own website, and then it varies a bit. I mean, sometimes, I guess it would go on like Monster and LinkedIn and some other sites like that too. There is a decent number of at least like the top ranked applicants that there's often some relationship with the school, faculty members. So it's good to talk to your advisor and other faculty, and maybe they think of you as when they see this job, and this is going to be a good fit for whoever, and they pass it along, so you actually see it.
And as I'm evaluating maybe a research partner, I definitely will use LinkedIn if I'm trying to get information about a company, because I'm looking to gather I'm doing secondary research about a particular industry. Glassdoor is a great way to get information about companies. I think you mentioned Indeed. So
Actually, I didn't.
Oh, it's just in my head. We collaborated in our head.
Well, let me ask another prepared question then. Right now, I'm going to start with Alison this time. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you balance work and personal life in your current role?
Okay. That is an excellent question. So we are very fortunate in our company that we have some flexibility in terms of our schedules and our responsibilities and making sure that we're meeting all the deadlines that we have. So we have ability to be able to, I feel like we have a good balance between our home life and work. There are times though when a grant is due and it's big and you may not sleep very much, but that day will come, you'll turn it in and then you can sleep. But it is a balance of every day of but really I think the skills you're talking about, planning and organizing, and then when you add kids into the mix, so I have 8-year-old twins, and just trying to balance everything of that, but calendars, lots of planners, I think really help to be able to balance everything. But I think that if you have a good relationship with your people in your company, we're very lucky that we're very collaborative and work together, and the president of our company is very supportive, so if there is something that comes up, it's very flexible in trying to balance everything.
Yeah, it can certainly be a challenge at time with kids and lots of activities and things going on. But at RTI as well, I think there's a fair amount of flexibility, and it's gotten easier just with various tools and technology. Where of course I've been on a conference call just like last week, I think, while I was like outside dance. Well, the girls were inside dance. I was on call. I mean, there's a lot that we're sometimes to fit things in. I mean, I guess you have to be flexible, and maybe sometimes you have to leave earlier, go in late, and then you have multitask all the way, and catch up then in the in the evening, or but there's some flexibility around the schedule. I mean, it's really not a a 9 to 5 kind of thing necessarily. I mean, there's a lot that you need to get done. There's certainly deadlines, but with some flexibility often around how you get that done and how you fit it in. it gets stressful at times. I mean, sometimes, I mean, there just are things that have to be done by a certain day, and proposal, if you don't get a proposal on that day, then, it's not considered, right? So, you have to get them done.
And I would say, I mean, one of the nicest things I think about being in a, not in an academic setting is that you don't have things bleeding over into your personal life quite as much. I really value the fact that, I kind of have a 9-to-5 job, and I try to restrict what I do after hours, unless there's something like a proposal or something that's due, and that, that does happen. But it's nice to be able to go in and just focus on my work, and then when the day is done, I don't log back into my email or check it. And it's set that expectation early, and then people will, follow that expectation. But I think that's a really big benefit. You're not teaching classes at night. You're not having to work on a paper on the weekends necessarily, unless you want to. It's up to you. So that's how I balance it. I keep the work stuff over here, and when I go home, I try to kind of keep that very separate, which is very hard to do. It's not the trend these days.
And I would add to, again, all these smart comments that I would say it really begins with self-assessment. Know your values, know your priorities. I think, again, that's something we take for granted. I like that you did you use the word mindful? Who used the word mindful? Mindfulness. Okay, never mind. I don't know where this, well, so being mindful about how you plan, how you want to live your life. I think it's something we very much take for granted, especially in a high achievement environment at Duke. It feels like a lot of those expectations are kind of set for you and feel outside your control. And I love to hear people finding ways to, self-empower around those things. Great news, you're in this like petri dish for doing research on yourself and how you go about doing that and figuring out how to practice that now when, you don't have other responsibilities. So self-assessment. For me, my work is unlike yours in that I do work out of my home with my high-speed internet, go Google Fiber, and when I'm in the middle of a project or running concurrent projects, I can work a 40 to upwards of a 60 or even 70-hour a week, depending on the structure of the projects. And I don't get to turn it off because my office is just right there, and my laptop, and I have Wi-Fi, and my laptop is always available to me. So it is a practice of being mindful and practicing shifting your attention.
So to wrap things up, I'm just going to ask each panelist, is there one thing you'd like folks in the audience to take away with them after today? And then we'll open it up for some one-on-one networking, since that's been an ongoing theme of the discussion today. So again, one thing you'd like folks to take away with them today. Robert, you look ready.
Well, I mean, we talked about this, I think, within a couple of different questions, but I think, and maybe it's sort of broad, but I think it really is thinking about soft skills and how do you build time management and prioritization, communication. How do you build other skills that are, they're often outside of the main focus of the program that you're in, where you're trying to often learn a lot of very technical and quantitative skills that are really important, but I mean, again, depending on what your priorities are, but in terms of getting positions and advancing over time, it's often not, not necessarily those skills that are leading to, advancement and success as much as it is, interpersonal skills and being able to collaborate and people actually wanting to work with you. So I think that's probably, I know that's something I didn't realize when I was in graduate school that much. I was thinking very much, okay, get the work done for classes and thinking about technical skills and really not thinking about softer skills like that.
I would just say that when I was in graduate school, I didn't realize that there was this option, but I thought that it was just academia was the option. And as I said before, I would have asked more questions, or just have or looked for opportunities as there was more networking to find out about these different types of opportunities, that there are all different ways that you can take the skills you're learning as a PhD and apply them if it fits with what you're saying, your goals and your values, what you're looking for. And so I wanted to be able to improve the lives of children, be able to give them skills so they can continue to foster their development in really positive ways. And so, but I think that just being able to continue to look for opportunities and ask questions and utilize all of what you have at this university.
That resonates with me, and I would add, stay open. I think it's very easy for us to gain something of a tunnel vision about what work life should be, and the workplace is changing. And forward-thinking people are going to the degree we're all able to be elastic, we're all going to find ways to be flexible and remain open to possibility. I would have never known about market research as an opportunity had I not remained open to possibility.
Yeah, I mean, I would make the same pitch that there are a lot of good opportunities outside of academia, and it takes a little more research because your professors are geared towards academia. That's what they know. But there's a lot of organizations. There are a lot of places just within the triangle, for example, that have RTI is headquartered here, but other organizations have branch offices somewhere, or might be headquartered here as well. So there's lots of great opportunities to just have to do some digging.
Can I add to that? Because that's really important. You may have to teach your professors how to help you, because they don't always remember that they have contacts. They have, like if you're a writer and you want to say get into publishing or editing, guess what? They know tons of editors that you could talk to, maybe not a job opportunity, but people that you could talk to and start a networking branch. They may not always, they're not necessarily cognizant all the time about what your needs are. And that onus is really on every single one of us to recognize, self-assess, recognize our own needs, and then figure out a plan. Okay, how do I get my needs met?
I think on that note, we'll close things, and I'll ask for a round of applause for our panelists for sharing their expertise today.